The acid rain station. The acid rain hissed against Vega's thermal hood, eating tiny holes through the outer polymer layer. Her lungs burned from the sporadic gusts of ammonia-laced wind that forced their way through her respirator's worn filters. Each step forward in the jellied mud of Ketris Station's landing pad threatened to pull her boots clean off. But it was the distant silver-blue shimmer in the corner of her vision that truly unnerved her, the chronomistic ripple that had been haunting the edges of her perception since the severing. "Mercy, dock or walk," barked the station director, a Voth with mismatched cybernetic eyes, neither of which bothered to look at her as he consulted his manifest. Docking fees, 738 credits. Life support access, another 295. Pay for both or you're back in your ship and off my station in 20 minutes. The chronomistic shimmer pulsed. Vega blinked hard, trying to force it from her vision. I already paid the approach fee. That was supposed to cover 48 hours. Revised policy. Independents pay premium, especially those with. He paused, his natural eye finally lifting to examine her weathered flight jacket with its torn insignia. Colorful backgrounds. Overhead, the station's ancient environmental shields flickered, allowing another brief shower of corrosive droplets to patter against the dock. A warning klaxon blared 3 times, then sputtered into an electronic gurgle. Nobody bothered to look up. The station's state of disrepair was simply part of the landscape here, like the acid rain and the extortionate fees. Vega adjusted her scarf higher over her nose, feeling the rough fabric brush against her chapped skin. 7 years after leaving official service, and still the bureaucrats and functionaries could smell military on her like predators scenting blood. Though these days it was less about her past and more about extracting whatever credits they could. Ketris Station had always been a cesspit, but it had gotten remarkably worse since the Mercantile Authority had expanded into this sector. Fine, she said, transferring the credits from her already depleted account. I'll need access to your market level. I have salvage to sell. The Voth's artificial eye whirred as it focused on her. Salvage. Of course you do. He made no effort to hide his skepticism but tapped his console anyway. Market level opens in 3 hours. Don't cause trouble, or you'll find yourself spacing without a suit. The chronomistic shimmer flared again, this time accompanied by a high-pitched ringing in her left ear, like the sound of fine crystal struck by a knife. Vega winced, earning a suspicious glare from the director. Medical services are extra, he added, misinterpreting her reaction. I don't need medical, she replied automatically, though the lie was becoming less convincing with each passing day. The shimmer had started appearing more frequently since she'd picked up that odd debris field near the Helicus rift. Just reflections from space dust on her viewport, she'd told herself. But viewport reflections didn't follow you planetside, and they certainly didn't whisper just at the threshold of hearing. The Voth dismissed her with a gesture, already turning to the next arrival. Vega adjusted her pack and headed toward the inner airlock, carefully picking her path through the caustic puddles. The shimmer followed, dancing at the periphery of her vision like an attentive pet. 3 levels up and 2 security checkpoints later, she found herself in what passed for Ketris Station's Market Square, a cavernous, repurposed cargo bay with mismatched gravity plating that made every 4th step feel like walking through syrup. Stalls fashioned from shipping containers and repurposed bulkheads lined the walls, while the center was dominated by an auction block, a raised circular platform surrounded by tiered seating. A crowd had already gathered despite the early hour. Vega leaned against a support column, watching as a Mercantile Authority auctioneer, a slender human woman in the characteristic charcoal uniform with crimson piping, took her position on the platform. 2 security officers flanked her, their pulse rifles held in casual but visible readiness. Something was different about today's auction. The air hummed with an unusual tension, and the shimmer in Vega's vision pulsed more insistently than ever. Whatever was about to happen here would change everything, she could feel it in her bones, in the way the mysterious artifacts in her ship's hold seemed to resonate with some unseen frequency. The auctioneer raised her voice, and Vega knew there was no turning back. The forbidden auction. Opening lot, the auctioneer announced, her voice amplified to fill the space. Salvage rights to stellar freighter designation CX 11938. Abandoned in Sector Kalia. Hull intact. Cargo unknown. Minimum bid, 5,000 credits. The bidding proceeded swiftly, and Vega observed the crowd more than the auction itself. These weren't the normal salvage operators or cargo speculators she was accustomed to seeing. There was an unusual number of private collectors, representatives identifiable by their formal attire and discreet communication devices, mixed with the usual assortment of scavengers, ship captains, and junkers. The mood shifted noticeably when the auctioneer announced the next lot. The security officers stiffened, their rifles moving to a more alert position. Special acquisition, the auctioneer stated, her professional detachment slipping just enough to reveal a hint of distaste. Sentient contraband, seized for transgression of Mercantile Authority Restricted Knowledge Statute 316. Two more security officers emerged from a side door, half dragging a figure between them. At first glance, Vega took it for a child, but as they hauled it onto the platform, she realized her mistake. The being stood barely 1.5 meters tall, with a slender build that made it appear even smaller. Its skin was a mottled blue-gray, darkening to almost black along its spine and limbs. What Vega had initially taken for clothing was actually a network of intricate ridges and plates covering its torso, a natural armor that gleamed with an iridescent sheen under the harsh market lights. The being's hands were bound with energy cuffs that occasionally sparked, suggesting some kind of conductive property to its skin. Its face was the most unsettling part, almost featureless except for two large, solid black eyes and a lipless mouth. No nose was visible, just two slight indentations where one might expect nostrils. Its head was hairless but covered in the same ridged plating as its body, forming what resembled a natural crown or crest. The chronomistic shimmer in Vega's peripheral vision pulsed strongly, and the crystalline ringing in her ear intensified. Specimen is the last known carrier of Lycene cultural artifacts, the auctioneer continued. Illegal neuroorganic data storage detected during standard security scan. Bidding opens at 25,000 credits for the specimen itself. Separate bids will be accepted for extraction rights of the embedded data. A murmur ran through the crowd. Even in the moral cesspool of Ketris Station, the open auctioning of a sentient being was unusual. The Mercantile Authority typically maintained at least a thin veneer of legality by classifying such sales as indentured security custody or cultural quarantine. This naked commercialization suggested either desperation or something exceptionally valuable. The being's black eyes scanned the crowd without expression. Then, as if sensing Vega's attention, it turned and looked directly at her. A pattern of faint blue lights flickered briefly across its crest plates, so quickly that Vega might have imagined it if not for the sudden corresponding pulse of the chronomistic shimmer in her vision. She recognized the pattern. Not consciously, not in any way she could articulate, but something deep in her brain responded to those lights like an ancient lock recognizing its key. It was the same pattern as the artifacts she'd recovered from the debris field, the strange crystalline fragments now secured in her ship's hold. The pattern wasn't just similar. It was identical. And somehow, impossibly, she knew it was a mathematical sequence representing an outlawed harmonics theory from the lost Lycene civilization, a civilization that had been systematically erased from history by the Mercantile Authority 3 centuries ago. The being's gaze remained fixed on her, and though its face showed no expression, Vega felt its desperation as clearly as if it had screamed. Another flicker of lights across its crest, another corresponding pulse of the shimmer in her vision. This was why the shimmer had been following her. This was what the whispers at the edge of her hearing had been trying to tell her. The debris field hadn't been random space junk. It had been deliberate, a message in a bottle cast into the cosmic ocean, hoping against hope to find someone who could still read it. Bidding starts at 25,000 credits, the auctioneer repeated, her voice cutting through Vega's realization. A collector's representative near the front raised a hand. 27,500. 30,000, called another from the opposite side. Vega's mind raced. She didn't have anywhere near that kind of money. And even if she did, what exactly was she planning to do? Rescue a contraband alien based on a weird visual phenomenon only she could see and a gut feeling about some salvage? It was exactly the kind of impulsive decision that had ended her military career and landed her in this life of scraping by on salvage runs and courier jobs. The chronomistic shimmer flared so brightly that Vega had to stop herself from physically ducking. The being's crest flickered again, this time in a more complex pattern, and suddenly, impossibly, an image appeared in Vega's mind, vivid and complete. A crystalline spire rising from an azure sea, its facets capturing and refracting sunlight into intricate patterns that seemed to hang in the air like visible music. Around the spire, smaller crystal formations emerged from the water, each adding its own notes to the symphony of light. And as the vision expanded, she saw thousands of beings like the one on the auction block, gathered in concentric circles around the spire, their crest plates flickering in harmonious patterns that somehow corresponded to the light display. The vision of harmonic confluence. The name came to her unbidden, in a language she had never learned yet somehow understood. It wasn't just an image. It was a memory, not her own, but one preserved in the crystalline fragments she'd salvaged. And now she was seeing it broadcast directly from the being's mind to hers, facilitated by whatever strange connection had formed between them. 42,000, called a voice from the back, dragging Vega back to the present. The being was still staring at her, its black eyes unblinking. The security officers shifted uncomfortably, one of them giving the creature a warning prod with his rifle. The crest plates dimmed, but the connection remained. Vega had a choice to make, and she was running out of time. The Great Escape. 45,000, countered another bidder. Vega had a total of 7,183 credits to her name after paying the station fees. Even if she sold her ship and everything in it, she wouldn't come close to the current bid. But she couldn't just walk away. Not with the knowledge that this being was carrying what might be the last intact memories of an exterminated civilization, one that the Mercantile Authority had gone to great lengths to erase from history. She pushed away from the column and moved closer to the auction block, mind racing. There had to be some angle, some loophole she could exploit. The Mercantile Authority operated by its own twisted version of legality, but it did operate by rules. Rules could be worked around. 60,000, came a new voice, a tall, elegant being with silvery skin and multiple sets of articulated limbs. A Tessian, rare in this sector and known for their extensive private collections of cultural artifacts. The auctioneer smiled thinly. 60,000 credits for the Lysine carrier. Do I hear 65? The crowd murmured. The price was climbing beyond what most could afford, narrowing the field to serious collectors and institutional buyers. Vega reached the edge of the platform and studied the security officers. Standard Authority issue, minimally trained but heavily armed. The energy cuffs on the being's wrists were basic models, designed for humanoid physiology. They might not be properly calibrated for the creature's unusual biological makeup. As if reading her thoughts, the being's crest plates flickered again, and another image formed in Vega's mind. Not a vision of the past this time, but a complex diagram showing the internal workings of the energy cuffs, highlighting a specific frequency vulnerability. The chronomistic shimmer in her vision pulsed in the same pattern. It wasn't just communicating with her. It was giving her a plan. 70,000, called the Tessian. 75,000, countered a humanoid in the formal robes of a corporate archival director. While the attention was on the bidding war, Vega activated her wrist computer, surreptitiously scanning the nearby security systems. The station used an outdated network architecture, not surprising given its general state of disrepair. With the right approach, she might be able to exploit it. Mercantile Authority Reclamation Statute, Vega called out suddenly, her voice cutting through the bidding. The auctioneer paused, frowning at the interruption. Excuse me. Mercantile Authority Reclamation Statute, Vega repeated, louder and with the kind of authoritative tone she hadn't used since commanding a military vessel. Section 47, Paragraph 8. Any individual who can demonstrate prior salvage claim to related materials has priority bidding rights, including right of first refusal and cost basis adjustment. It was a real statute, though she was stretching its interpretation considerably. Salvage laws were a tangled mess of contradictory regulations that even the authority's own legal team struggled to navigate consistently. The auctioneer's eyes narrowed. This is a security seizure, not a salvage auction. You announced it as special acquisition and are selling extraction rights separately from the specimen, Vega countered, loud enough for the entire crowd to hear. That classifies it as a partial salvage auction under Combined Commercial Code. I have a valid prior claim to related lysine artifacts, recovered from Sector 089, Theta, registered with Central Authority last month. This was a complete fabrication, but one that would take time to verify, time she could use. The security officers exchanged uncertain glances. The auctioneer's expression hardened. Do you have documentation of this claim? She demanded. Uploaded to my ship's secure server, Vega replied smoothly. I'd be happy to provide access once my legal priority is acknowledged. More lies. But the bluff had created exactly the disruption she needed. While all eyes were on her, she activated a specific sequence on her wrist computer, a remnant from her military days that should never have made it into civilian hands. The small device sent out a targeted electromagnetic pulse, carefully calibrated to the frequency she'd seen in the being's mental diagram. The energy cuffs around the being's wrists flickered momentarily. This is highly irregular, the auctioneer said. Security, escort this woman to verification. One of the guards moved toward Vega, but before he could reach her, the overhead lights suddenly dimmed, then flared brightly, the result of her electromagnetic pulse affecting more than just the cuffs. In the momentary confusion, the being acted. With a swift motion that belied its seemingly frail physique, it brought its hands together, the compromised cuffs shattering on impact. Before the nearest guard could react, the being pressed its palms against the guard's exposed neck. There was no visible attack, but the guard collapsed instantly, as if all neural signals to his muscles had simply ceased. Chaos erupted. The crowd surged backward while the remaining guards raised their weapons. The being moved with startling speed, leaping from the platform directly toward Vega. Acting on instinct more than conscious thought, Vega drew her sidearm, an old military-issue neurodisruptor that was technically illegal in civilized spaces, and fired twice at the overhead environmental control panel. The panel exploded in a shower of sparks, triggering emergency protocols. Warning sirens blared as emergency shutters began descending around the market perimeter. The being reached her side, its black eyes fixed on hers with an intensity that transcended the need for words. The chronomistic shimmer enveloped them both now, no longer at the periphery of her vision but surrounding them like a cocoon of shifting light. This way! Vega shouted over the alarms, gesturing toward a maintenance corridor she'd noted earlier. The being followed without hesitation. They sprinted down the corridor as security alerts echoed throughout the station. The being moved with uncanny grace despite its small stature, easily keeping pace with Vega's longer stride. Behind them, she could hear the heavy boots of security forces giving chase. The station's automated systems were slowly coming back online, but the electromagnetic pulse had bought them precious minutes. Now they had to reach her ship before the lockdown sealed every exit. As they ran, the being's crest plates began to glow with a steady blue light, and Vega felt something she hadn't experienced in years: hope. Whatever this creature was, whatever knowledge it carried, it was now her responsibility to protect. The Mercantile Authority had made their choice when they decided to auction off a sentient being like cargo. Now they would face the consequences. Ancient memories awakened. 3 levels down and through a maze of service corridors, Vega and her unlikely companion reached the docking bay. Emergency klaxons still wailed throughout the station, but the immediate pursuit had fallen behind. The electromagnetic pulse had apparently scrambled more of the security grid than she'd hoped. Stay close, Vega muttered, though she wasn't sure if the being understood her words. It seemed to understand her intent well enough, following her through the shadows between parked vessels toward her ship. The Wanderer's Rest wasn't much to look at, a converted military transport with more patches than original hull plating, but it was hers, and more importantly, it was fast. As they approached the boarding ramp, the being suddenly stopped, its crest plates flaring brightly. Images flooded Vega's mind, not the gentle, controlled visions from before, but a torrent of memories that threatened to overwhelm her consciousness. She saw the Lycene homeworld in its prime, vast crystal cities that sang with harmonic energy, beings like her companion moving in graceful synchronized patterns that generated power from pure resonance. She saw the first contact with human explorers, the initial wonder and exchange of knowledge. And then she saw the betrayal. The Mercantile Authority's forces arriving in overwhelming numbers, not as traders or diplomats, but as conquerors. The systematic destruction of the crystal cities, the harvesting of Lycene technology while the beings themselves were rounded up and categorized as non-human intellectual property. The few who escaped, scattered across the galaxy, carrying fragments of their civilization's memory in the biological data storage organs of their bodies. By the void, Vega whispered, stumbling as the vision ended. They didn't just conquer your people. They erased you from history. The being, she couldn't keep thinking of it as just, the being, nodded slowly. When it spoke, the words formed directly in her mind, bypassing the need for vocal cords or universal translators. I am Quetzal, last of the memory keepers. For 3 centuries, I have carried the final songs of my people, waiting for one who could hear them. The artifacts in my cargo hold, Vega said. They're not just debris, are they? Fragments of the Great Resonance. When your people destroyed our cities, some of us managed to scatter memory crystals into the void, hoping they would find their way to those who could understand. You were chosen by the crystals, Vega Chin. They recognized something in you, a dissonance with the Authority's harmony. The use of her full name should have surprised her, but somehow it didn't. The crystals had been scanning her, learning about her, preparing her for this moment. What's in your memories? She asked as they hurried up the boarding ramp. What's worth 3 centuries of hiding? The location of the Nexus. The Authority believes they destroyed all our harmonic technology, but they were wrong. One installation remains, hidden, protected, waiting. With it, we could restore the Great Resonance. We could give your galaxy a power source that doesn't require conquest or exploitation. Inside the ship, Vega quickly ran through her pre-flight sequence while Quetzal settled into the co-pilot's chair. The station's security forces would be mobilizing soon, and they needed to be gone before the lockdown became absolute. And what's to stop the Authority from just taking this technology like they took everything else? Vega asked, initiating the engine startup sequence. Because this time, we will not be unprepared. The Nexus contains more than just power generation technology. It holds the accumulated knowledge of a civilization that mastered energy at the quantum level. Weapons, defenses, technologies that your Authority has never imagined. The ship's engines hummed to life, and Vega felt a familiar thrill as the Wanderer's Rest lifted off from the docking pad. Through the viewports, she could see security shuttles launching from other parts of the station, but they were too late. Her ship was already accelerating toward the hyperspace boundary. Where is this Nexus? She asked. Another image formed in her mind, a star map, showing a route that led far from any Authority territory, deep into the galactic rim where ancient dangers and older mysteries still held sway. In the shattered nebula, where the First Great War broke the fabric of space itself. The Authority's ships cannot follow us there, the hyperspace disruptions would tear them apart. But your ship, it carries the resonance frequency of the memory crystals now. It can navigate the chaos. As if to confirm Quetzal's words, the crystalline fragments in Vega's cargo hold began to glow, their light visible even through the sealed containment unit. The ship's systems registered the energy output but couldn't classify it, marking it only as unknown harmonic signature. This is insane, Vega muttered, but she was already plotting the course. The Authority had taken everything from her, her career, her reputation, her sense of purpose. Now they were trading in sentient beings, auctioning off the last survivors of genocide civilizations. It was time for them to face something they couldn't buy, steal, or regulate out of existence. The shattered nebula it is, she said, and engaged the hyperdrive. As the stars stretched into lines and space folded around them, Quetzal's crest plates pulsed with what might have been gratitude or anticipation. In the cargo hold, the memory crystals sang with harmonies that had been silent for 3 centuries, their light growing stronger with each passing moment. The Authority had made a crucial mistake. They had assumed that power came from domination, that control was the only force that mattered in the galaxy. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The dragons of the ancient Lycene civilization were awakening, and they were very, very angry. Galactic reckoning. The shattered nebula lived up to its reputation. Hyperspace currents twisted and writhed like living things, threatening to tear apart any vessel that dared enter its chaotic embrace. But the Wanderer's Rest, guided by the resonance of the Lycene memory crystals, navigated the impossible paths with an elegance that defied physics. There, Quetzal's voice echoed in Vega's mind as they emerged from a particularly violent spatial fold. Do you see it? Ahead of them, impossibly preserved in the heart of the nebula's chaos, hung a structure that took Vega's breath away. It was vast, easily the size of a small moon, but clearly artificial. Crystalline spires twisted and flowed like frozen music, their surfaces reflecting and refracting the nebula's multicolored light into patterns that seemed to pulse with their own heartbeat. The Nexus, Vega whispered. The last great work of my people. Hidden here when the first scouts brought word of your Authority's approach. Waiting for the day when the memory keepers could return. As they approached, the station's dormant systems began to awaken. Lights flickered to life along the crystalline corridors, and a low harmonic hum filled the vacuum of space, a sound that shouldn't have been possible but somehow reached them anyway. The Wanderer's Rest settled into a docking cradle that formed itself from the living crystal of the station's hull. The moment the airlock sealed, Vega felt the change. The oppressive weight that had pressed on her consciousness for years, the constant background noise of the Authority's influence, suddenly lifted. What is this place? She asked as they walked through corridors that sang with harmonic energy. More than a research facility. More than a weapon. It is the living memory of our entire civilization, preserved in crystalline matrices that can exist across multiple dimensions simultaneously. They emerged into a vast central chamber dominated by a pillar of pure energy that stretched from floor to ceiling. Around it, thousands of smaller crystals floated in perfect geometric patterns, each one pulsing with its own rhythm while contributing to the greater symphony. The Great Resonance, Quetzal said aloud, the first time Vega had heard the being's actual voice, a sound like crystal chimes in a gentle wind. The harmonic frequency that connects all energy in the universe. Your Authority seeks to control power through domination and scarcity. We learn to work with it, to become partners with the fundamental forces rather than their masters. The pillar of energy pulsed brighter, and suddenly Vega could see it, not just the power source, but the network it was connected to. Threads of energy stretched out across the galaxy, touching every star, every planet, every living thing. The Authority's grid of control was visible too, a harsh, angular web that constrained and channeled the natural flow of cosmic energy. You're going to replace their entire infrastructure, Vega realized. Not replace. Liberate. The galaxy's energy has been enslaved for centuries, forced to flow only through Authority-controlled channels. The Great Resonance will offer an alternative, free energy, available to all who learn to work in harmony rather than through conquest. Over the following hours, Quetzal guided Vega through the process of awakening the Nexus to its full potential. The memory crystals from her cargo hold were integrated into the station's matrix, adding their stored knowledge to the vast library already contained within the crystalline structure. As the system came online, Vega felt the change ripple outward through hyperspace. Across the galaxy, worlds that had been dependent on Authority-controlled power grids suddenly found themselves with access to unlimited clean energy. Colonial worlds that had been kept deliberately underdeveloped to maintain their dependence began to flourish. The rigid hierarchies that the Authority used to maintain control started to crumble as economic scarcity, their primary tool of oppression, became obsolete. They'll fight back, Vega warned. The Authority won't just accept this. Of course they will fight. But they will be fighting against the natural order of the universe itself. Their weapons require energy, energy that now flows according to harmonics of cooperation rather than domination. Their ships, their stations, their entire military apparatus depends on systems that can no longer function in disharmony with the Great Resonance. As if to prove the point, Vega's ship sensors detected a massive Authority fleet entering the nebula's outer reaches. Dozens of warships, led by a massive dreadnought that could single-handedly destroy entire worlds. They were coming to eliminate the threat to their power structure, to maintain their stranglehold on galactic civilization. But as they approached, something wonderful happened. The ship's weapons systems began to malfunction, not through sabotage, but because the energy they required now flowed according to different rules. Engines designed for brute force found themselves unable to function efficiently in the new harmonic environment. Communication systems that relied on authoritarian command structures became scrambled and unreliable. The Authority fleet, built on principles of domination and control, found itself helpless against a force that simply refused to be dominated. "It's beautiful," Vega breathed, watching as the massive warships drifted powerless in the nebula's embrace. "Just as often is," Ketris replied. "My people's memory is now free to spread throughout the galaxy. The knowledge of harmony will reach every world, every species. The Authority's age of conquest is ending." From the central chamber of the Nexus, Vega could see the future unfolding, not through prophecy, but through the logical progression of cause and effect. Worlds would learn to generate their own power through harmonic resonance. Species would cooperate rather than compete for resources. The vast military apparatus of the Authority would become obsolete, its personnel freed to pursue more constructive endeavors. It wouldn't happen overnight, and there would be resistance, even violence from those who profited from the old system. But the momentum was now unstoppable. The galaxy had tasted freedom, and it would not willingly return to chains. "What happens now?" Vega asked. Now we rebuild. The Lycene are gone, but their legacy lives on in the Great Resonance. You will help teach others to hear the harmony, to work with the natural flow of energy rather than against it." Vega nodded, feeling a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced since her military days, but this was different. This wasn't about following orders or maintaining someone else's vision of order. This was about liberation, about giving every being in the galaxy the chance to reach their full potential. "The Authority won't give up easily," she said. "They'll adapt, find new ways to maintain control. Perhaps. But they will find it increasingly difficult as more worlds learn the songs of harmony. Power shared multiplies, power hoarded diminishes. They built their empire on scarcity and fear. What happens to such an empire when abundance and hope spread across the stars?" Through the Nexus's sensors, Vega watched as the crippled Authority fleet began a slow retreat from the nebula. Some ships had managed to restore partial power by shutting down their weapons systems, an ironic necessity that left them defenseless. Others drifted helplessly, their crews no doubt frantically trying to understand what had happened to their superior technology. In the months that followed, reports came in from across the galaxy. On Meridian Prime, the Authority's industrial center, factories that had produced weapons of oppression found their energy systems converting to harmonic resonance, making them incapable of manufacturing instruments of war. Instead, they began producing tools of creation, medical equipment, agricultural enhancers, educational systems. On the colony worlds of the Outer Rim, populations that had been kept deliberately dependent discovered they could generate all the power they needed through simple harmonic crystals grown from common minerals. Trade routes that had been controlled by Authority monopolies became obsolete as worlds achieved energy independence. The revolution wasn't violent, it didn't need to be. It was simply inevitable, like water flowing downhill or energy seeking equilibrium. The universe itself had chosen harmony over domination. Ketris remained on the Nexus, serving as both guardian and teacher to the steady stream of pilgrims who found their way to the station. Vega became something she'd never expected to be, an ambassador, traveling between worlds and helping their populations understand and implement harmonic technology. The chronomistic shimmer that had haunted her vision was gone now, replaced by something far more beautiful, the ability to see the connections between all things, the flowing patterns of energy that bound the galaxy together in an intricate web of interdependence. Years passed. The Mercantile Authority still existed, but as a shadow of its former self. Some of its leaders had adapted, transforming their organizations into cooperative councils focused on facilitating trade and communication rather than controlling it. Others had retreated to isolated strongholds, clinging to the old ways even as their power base crumbled around them. One day, as Vega stood in the observation deck of a newly constructed Harmony station orbiting the former Authority capital world, Quetzal's voice reached her across the vast distances of space. It is done. The last of the memory crystals has been integrated into the Galactic Harmony network. Every world now has access to the songs of my people. The Great Resonance is complete. Vega smiled, watching as the planet below her, once the seat of galactic oppression, glowed with the soft light of harmonic energy. Children played in parks that had once been military installations. Former Authority officers worked alongside beings from dozens of species to build schools and hospitals and art centers. "What about you?" she asked. "Will you stay on the Nexus?" "My duty as memory keeper is fulfilled. The memories are no longer imprisoned in the mind of a single being, they belong to all now. I think I would like to see what my people's songs sound like when sung by the voices of 1,000 different species." In the distance, a ship approached, sleek, beautiful, its hull singing with harmonic frequencies. It was one of the new generation of vessels, powered not by controlled fusion or harvested antimatter, but by the willing cooperation of energy itself. Vega recognized the pilot as she docked, another former Authority officer who had found purpose in the new galaxy. They'd all been given a choice when the old system collapsed: cling to the past or help build the future. Most had chosen the future. "Ready for the next run?" the pilot asked as Vega boarded. "Always," Vega replied. There were still worlds to visit, still people to teach, still wonders to discover in a galaxy that was finally free to explore its full potential. As their ship jumped into hyperspace, Vega felt the familiar harmony of the Great Resonance carrying them forward. She thought of Ketris Station, where this had all begun, and learned that it had been transformed into a research facility studying the beneficial effects of harmonic energy on ecosystem restoration. The acid rain had stopped falling. The poisoned atmosphere was clearing. Life was returning to dead worlds across the galaxy, nurtured by the same energy that had once been used to oppress it. She thought of the beings who had been scheduled for auction that day. Most had been found and freed, their knowledge and abilities now contributing to the great work of galactic restoration. The collectors and slavers found their businesses obsolete in a universe where cooperation was more profitable than exploitation. The dragons of the ancient Lycene civilization had indeed awakened, but they were not creatures of destruction. They were songs of creation, melodies of hope, harmonies of infinite possibility. The galaxy sang, and it was beautiful. The end.